man with soot on his hands and no family name walks up to a dragon that has been alone for over 100 years. That dragon has killed men for less than a wrong step. It hasn't had a rider since before this man's grandfather was born, and it lets him climb on. Everyone watching that scene reacted the same way. Shock, maybe a little disbelief. But almost nobody stopped to ask the one question that actually matters. Why him? Not why a dragon chose a rider. Dragons choose riders all the time in this show. The question is why this dragon, Vermithor, the second largest flying weapon in Westeros, looked at a random blacksmith from Dragonstone and decided he already knew him. Today we're pulling that thread all the way to the end. Because the answer isn't random. It's about a woman who has never appeared on screen for a single second and who might end up shaping the entire second half of this show without anyone ever showing her face. Let's get into it. Quick context, because the details matter more than people give them credit for. By the end of Season 2, Rhaenyra is losing the numbers game badly. She's short on dragons, short on riders, and running out of time. So she makes a decision no ruling Targaryen has made before. She opens up dragon claiming to commoners. Anyone in the Seven Kingdoms with even a rumor of Valyrian blood in their family gets a shot at bonding with one of the riderless dragons sitting empty on Dragonstone. It is, by any measure, a desperate move. And the show doesn't hide that. Most of the people who try get burned alive on the spot. This isn't a fair tryout. It's a lottery where losing means dying. But two people walk away from it as dragon riders. One is Ulf, a man who very quickly starts acting like he was born to wear a crown even though nobody asked him to. The show later gives him the surname White, pointedly not Targaryen, and that denial says a lot on its own. The second is a blacksmith, a man who works metal for a living, who has no noble blood on paper, and who somehow walks straight up to Vermithor, a dragon so dangerous the show treats him like a walking natural disaster, and gets accepted without a fight. Here's the detail worth sitting with. Vermithor wasn't some unclaimed wild dragon. He had a rider once, generations back. That rider was King Jaehaerys I, one of the most powerful kings the Targaryen dynasty ever produced. So when this dragon, who spent over a century refusing every single person who came near him, suddenly accepts a stranger, that's not chance. In this universe, dragons respond to bloodline. Vermithor wasn't meeting someone new, he was recognizing family. Hugh doesn't announce any of this with a big speech. That's actually the most realistic part of the whole storyline. He tells his wife quietly, almost like it's something he's ashamed of rather than proud of. He says his mother was a Targaryen princess, that she ended up working in a pleasure house, and that she used to tell him when he was young that he was no different from her brother's own sons, men the audience already knows by name, Viserys and Daemon. Read that line again because it's doing more work than it looks like on the surface. If Hugh's mother is the sister of the men who fathered Viserys and Daemon, that places her in one exact spot on the Targaryen family tree. There is only one match. Her name in George R.R. Martin's companion book, Fire and Blood, is Saera Targaryen. Some corners of the internet spell it Sarah, but the book spells it Saera. And getting that right matters if you're actually digging into the source material instead of just repeating a rumor. Saera is the 9th child of King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne. And from a young age, she makes it clear she has zero interest in the quiet, decorative role the court expects from a princess. As a teenager, she's already caught up in scandal after scandal, involved with young lords at court in ways that embarrass the crown repeatedly. Eventually, her father runs out of patience and sends her to a mother house in Old Town, expecting her to become a septa and disappear quietly into religious life. That plan collapses almost immediately. Saera escapes to Essos and does something genuinely rare for a disgraced Targaryen princess. She reinvents herself completely, running pleasure houses first in Lys, later in Volantis, and by most accounts in the text, she doesn't just survive out there, she thrives. No court telling her how to behave, no father dictating her choices, just her own rules on her own terms. Here's where the two stories lock together. Years later, when King Jaehaerys is dying and the realm is tearing itself apart over who should inherit the throne, 3 of Saera's sons show up at a real historical event in the books called the Great Council of 101 AC to press their own claim. They're dismissed instantly because bastard sons don't inherit in Westeros, full stop. But that moment confirms something crucial. Saera had multiple sons, and according to the text, At least one observer at that council noted that one of them bore a striking resemblance to a young Jaehaerys. Now put that detail next to Vermithor letting Hugh approach without hesitation. A dragon that once belonged to Jaehaerys himself, accepting a rider who might carry Jaehaerys' own features generations later. That is not a coincidence the show is likely to leave unexplained. Fair question. Skeptics will say the theory sounds good on paper, but falls apart the second you check the timeline. Actually, it holds up better than most fan theories do. In Fire and Blood, Saera is only 14 years older than her nephew Daemon. On the show, Hugh reads as roughly the same age bracket as Daemon. Not a father figure, not an elder statesman, a peer. If Hugh is one of Saera's sons, born sometime during her years running pleasure houses in Essos, the ages line up almost exactly. That's one of the cleaner pieces of book-to-show math in the entire adaptation. Section 5. The show already started confirming this. Here's the part that's changed since this theory first started circulating. And it's the part most breakdown videos are still missing because they haven't caught up. This is no longer just a fan theory sitting in a corner of the internet. In interviews tied to Season 3, Hugh's actor has directly stated that Hugh has always known he's connected to the royal family, and that his mother was the aunt of Daemon Targaryen. That lines up exactly with the Saera identification, spoken almost as confirmed fact rather than speculation. The actor has also talked about how that secret shapes his entire performance. Hugh isn't playing a man discovering something new about himself. He's playing a man who has spent his whole life actively burying something he already knew, and who is now being forced to admit it out loud for the first time. According to the actor, that admission comes with a cost, something he's described using the same language book readers use for the family's darker legacy. Targaryen madness, waking up in someone who spent decades suppressing it. That's a very different character arc than surprise commoner becomes accidental hero. This is a man finally stopping the performance of pretending not to be who he actually is. If Hugh really is Saera's son, he isn't some random bastard the crown can quietly ignore. He's Rhaenyra's blood relative. Cousin to Daemon, cousin to the late King Viserys, cousin to Rhaenyra herself. His claim to Valyrian blood is just as legitimate as Jaehaerys's, Rhaenyra's own son. The same son plenty of characters in World whisper about because of who his father might actually be. That reframes Hugh's entire position in this war. He isn't a tool Rhaenyra picked up out of desperation on Dragonstone. He's family the crown spent generations pretending didn't exist. And people erased by royal families historically don't stay loyal to those families for very long. And Season 3 has already started giving that idea teeth. Hugh's arc has taken a brutal turn. His wife leaves for her brother's home in Tumbleton, and their daughter dies amid the starvation crisis gripping King's Landing during Rhaenyra's blockade, a blockade ordered by the very queen Hugh is fighting for. Multiple entertainment outlets covering the new episodes have pointed out the same uncomfortable possibility. If Hugh ever connects his daughter's death to Rhaenyra's own war strategy, that grief could become the exact spark that turns him against the crown he's been risking his life to protect. Think about what that means layered on top of the bloodline reveal. This isn't just a soldier questioning his orders. It's a Targaryen by blood, denied his whole life, watching the family he secretly belongs to make the decision that killed his child. Some critics have already compared where this could be heading to Daenerys Targaryen's turn in Game of Thrones, a slow-building betrayal that finally snaps. Except this time built on decades of rejection instead of a single bad season. One more detail worth knowing if you want to sound like you actually read the source material instead of just watching recap videos. Fire and Blood never tells us how Saera's story ends. Martin gives her the escape to Essos, the pleasure houses, the sons at the council, and then just stops. No death scene, no final fate, nothing. That's an open door most adaptations would kill for. It means the show has room to build an entire ending for her that the book never had to commit to. Given her age, she'd be somewhere around 70 by the current point in the story's timeline, so an actual on-screen appearance seems unlikely. But her influence over Hugh clearly isn't finished, and the writers know exactly what they're sitting on. So here's what actually matters for the rest of these episodes. Beyond just waiting for a name to appear in dialogue, watch how Hugh reacts every single time bloodlines, legitimacy, or succession come up in conversation around him. Watch whether he starts making decisions like a soldier following orders, or like a man who actually believes he has a claim of his own. And pay close attention anytime he talks about his childhood, because based on everything the cast has hinted at, that's where the real confirmation is gonna land. Not in a dramatic reveal scene with music swelling, but in a quiet detail dropped mid-conversation, the exact same way this entire theory started in the first place. Whether the show ever puts the name Saera Targaryen on screen in plain text or not, the pieces are already lined up for anyone paying attention. A dragon that once belonged to her father. An age that matches her son almost perfectly. A backstory that fits no other Targaryen woman in the entire family tree. And now the actor himself all but confirming it in interviews. That's the thing about this show that keeps pulling people back in season after season. The biggest reveals rarely come with a fanfare. Sometimes they're sitting quietly in a blacksmith's confession to his wife, waiting for someone to actually connect the dots instead of scrolling past them. If you want more of these breakdowns as the rest of the season unfolds, subscribe and drop a comment with who you think Ulf's real parent might be, because that mystery is nowhere near solved either. See you in the next one.